everyone, Siobhan here. Today is Friday, it's my vlog Friday, and I decided I was going to do my very first Storytime video. I really like these sort of Storytime things that I keep seeing on YouTube, and I was recently on my front page and I came across a whole string of Storytimes that were centered around terrible roommate stories. And I thought it was hilarious. Some of them were actually kind of scary, but most of them were funny. And being a native New Yorker, I of course have a ton of crazy roommate stories. So I thought that today I would share some of that with you. And hopefully this will be something that's funny or entertaining, maybe not. I don't know. I'm just gonna go for it and see what you guys think. I have to preface the video by sort of giving you a little bit of a backstory, and I'll try to do that really quickly. I grew up in Greenwich Village. My parents were married for something like 20 years. They divorced shortly before I graduated high school, and I guess it was that September, I was 18, the Twin Towers fell. And I was going to Hunter Community College at the time. I wasn't really sure what I was going to be doing. I ended up dropping out because I guess like many other New Yorkers, I had some sort of PTSD and I was feeling kind of confused about my life, and I decided to work full-time for a while so that I could figure out what it was that I wanted to do, with the intention of maybe going back to school at a later date. But in the interim, I was dealing with my family having ended, and my mom and dad, they fought behind closed doors, so my brother and I were kind of excluded from that. It was kind of hurting my relationship with my mom, and I decided that I wanted an adventure and I was going to move out. And of course, having full-time work, it was easier for me to do that than it would have been if I hadn't been working, because I was now getting paid. And the first neighborhood that I looked into was Astoria in Queens. Astoria is a Greek neighborhood, Greek families, Greek restaurants, so there was like a sense of familiarity that was very, very important to me as an 18-year-old going out into the world on my own for the first time in New York City. And while I really, really loved Greenwich Village, there was absolutely no way I could afford to live there on my own. I wanted the change of neighborhood so that that would make me feel like I was having a fresh start. I found an apartment. I can't remember if it was through Craigslist or through like renter.com or roommate.com, something like that, but it was this really great apartment within sort of like a house. And it was a 3-bedroom apartment, and there were already 2 people living there. And for the purposes of the video, I'm going to call them Rebecca and Dave. Rebecca and Dave were both Romanian. Rebecca had won a green card in the lottery in her country and had married Dave to bring him over. They were not like a romantic couple. They were platonic friends. They were definitely not lovers. They had their own rooms, their own lives. And while I never really knew, I always kind of assumed that there was some sort of monetary exchange there for Dave to come too. And I'll get to the reason why I thought that later on in the video. Rebecca was, I want to say like 23, 24, so she was a little bit older than I was. And Dave was the oldest. I think he was somewhere in his mid-20s to late 20s, so like maybe 26 or 27. I'm 18, and while that doesn't seem like very many years in terms of maturity and experience, it actually kind of is. I guess it's the same difference between a kid who's 5 and 10. That's sort of what it felt like for me walking in and meeting them. My parents came with me to see the apartment, and I was very lucky because the landlady's name was Maria and she was Greek, and the fact that I was Greek, my family was Greek, sort of helped me out later on down the road when I was feeling kind of uncomfortable within my apartment, because I had this landlady who was sort of backing me up. I don't know what it is about Greek people. You can be anywhere in the world, but when you meet another Greek person who needs your help, you'll help them. I don't know, Greek people kind of stick together. The rent was divided according to the size of the bedroom. Rebecca had the largest room. It was the one facing the street, and we were on the 2nd floor, so we weren't very high up. Dave had the one that was off the kitchen. His was kind of, I guess, medium size. To me, it's a big room now. It's almost the same size as the bedroom that I currently have here on the Upper East Side. But back then, if you compared that to Rebecca's room, it was sort of a smaller room. And what I had, or what I was going for, interviewing for, was the smallest bedroom, which was literally kind of like a prison cell in the sense that it was, I don't know, maybe like 6 feet by like 8 feet or something. I was only able to fit a twin bed, a very small desk and chair, and I had a tiny little wardrobe that was already in the room that was there for me to use if I needed it. It all went really well. They really liked my family. They felt comfortable with me. It seemed like Rebecca was sort of interested in getting to know me a little bit personally, because she said something that I thought was really nice, and that was that I reminded her of her little sister back at home. Dave was he was very polite, but he was a little bit standoffish, and of course, it makes sense to me now. I was an 18-year-old girl. He probably thought I was silly and frivolous, and he didn't care about me so long as I was paying the rent and staying out of his way. So he sort of seemed like some of the older cousins that I've had in that he just wasn't very interested in getting to know me, but would be polite. And I guess for my first roommate experience, that felt sufficient. The first few weeks went by and were totally fine and normal. They seemed okay. I was dealing with a little bit of loneliness because I was going to work and school and coming home, and for some reason in my 18-year-old naive brain, I really thought that it was going to be like living in an episode of The Real World where I had friends and they would talk to me and we would hang out, but it wasn't like that at all. So for the first few months, or I guess the first few weeks, I started to have to adjust to the whole nobody wants to talk to you when they get home, they just want to go in their room and go to sleep. And so that was unexpected for me in the sense that there was a lot of loneliness that I was experiencing. But other than that, there were things that were, I guess, kind of like the typical roommate stuff, like where we would say to each other, hey, are those your dishes in the sink? We had some scheduling conflicts centered around the bathroom. But thankfully, we were able to work through that because all of us had different sort of working schedules. Rebecca worked for Clarence. She was a shop girl in Bloomingdale's. I worked in an office from 9 to 5. And I can't even remember what it is that Dave did. It seemed like he dabbled in kind of like everything. It started to get weird for me, I would say probably like a month or 2 months into living there. It started with Dave. I was being paid bi-weekly. That meant every 2 weeks I would get a check. One check went entirely to rent, and the other one was meant for me to live off of. So I had to pay phone, I had to pay MetroCard, groceries, laundry, cigarettes, anything that it was that I needed. I had to use one check for rent and one for living. So if I made any purchases at all, it was kind of a big deal for me. I wasn't a very experienced chef when I moved out. I'm lucky because my parents cooked for me pretty much every night while I was growing up. But I did watch them, and so I learned a few things. And what I would do was go to my local Key Food grocery store and buy a few ingredients, things that I knew how to make. And my plan was always to make a giant meal and then eat that for the entirety of the week. And that was my way of sort of conserving my funds. And it was just because I couldn't afford to have takeout every single day. I started to notice that things were missing on a daily basis. It was getting to the point where I couldn't really ignore it, and it was super obvious. For instance, I would come home and I'd want to make pasta primavera, and I'd go into my cupboard and I would notice that the pasta that I bought was gone. And it was weird because everything had been made clear to me, like what belongs to who and which cabinet was ours or theirs. I had a shelf in the refrigerator that was just for me. That was really annoying, but I didn't know which roommate was doing it, and I was still not, I wasn't courageous enough to confront either of them, so I let that slip for a while. But then one day something happened and it was just impossible for me to ignore. Dave came out of his bedroom to use the bathroom. I happened to be in the kitchen at the time, and I didn't mean to be a busybody, but I just sort of turned and noticed that there was a bag of Oreo cookies that I had purchased on his nightstand, half eaten. I know it seems really silly to get angry over a bag of Oreo cookies, but like I said, I had very little money to my name at this point in my life, and it just felt like a real sort of violation, disrespect. It was just like he really didn't give a shit about how I felt about my things. He took them and I just couldn't ignore it. So I told him, like, look, those are mine. You now owe me a bag of Oreo cookies. Please do not touch the things in the refrigerator that are mine. Please do not touch my dishes. Please do not touch my stuff in the pantry that belongs to me, and we'll be okay. One of the things that I haven't said about Dave being an Eastern European man, he was a little bit of a chauvinist. And this wasn't super unfamiliar to me because the Greek people that I know are kind of like this too, in that gender roles are very specific. Women are women, men are men, young people obey older people. And I think that he took offense to being called out, and I also think that it really bothered him that me, as a younger woman, I was asking him to do something and he had no intention of listening to me, and I think that it was really annoying when I told him that he had to listen to me and had to respect me and had to respect my stuff. And from there on in, he was kind of a terror to me. It was scary. In our living room, we had a couch that was not against any wall. It was just kind of sitting in the room, and behind the couch was the door, the entrance to get into the apartment. Obviously, the TV was in front of the couch, and if you sat on it, you wouldn't see the person coming in or out of the apartment unless you turned around. Once in a while, I would watch a movie with Rebecca. Sometimes I would sit in the living room and read a book by myself. It kind of depended on the situation. Dave would come up behind me wherever I was on the sofa, and he would kick it as hard as he could. So if I was sitting in the center, he'd just come up behind me and kick the couch really, really hard. And of course, my body would lurch forward. It would startle me. I wouldn't expect it. you know, if I had a drink in my hand, maybe I'd spill that. And he did it on several different occasions. It was actually kind of scary. That was when I started to feel like, oh my God, like he could hurt me. And it was weird too, because sometimes I would turn around and I would look at him and he would go, ha ha ha, I got you, like a joke. And then other times he would just kick the couch where I was sitting and walk away and say nothing. So that was even creepier to me. Dave was Rebecca's friend from back home, and I would talk to her a little bit about it and say, hey, you know, can you please, you know, tell him to just leave me alone? Like, don't tell him not to do that. And she was always very kind and reassuring and would say, yes, I will make sure that I speak to him. No, that's not okay, etc., etc. Dave began to find ways to isolate and confuse me, and one of the ways in which he did it was through his language. He used the fact that he was bilingual to his advantage, and it was incredibly intimidating. If I happened to leave a dish in the sink, if I lingered in the bathroom, even if it was my allotted time to use the shower or whatever it was, he would scream and freak out, and he would say all of these things in Romanian. Of course, I couldn't defend myself, and he would direct all of his anger onto Rebecca, who of course would try to soothe him and calm him down. But that in it of itself was frightening. So he had been kicking the back of the couch, screaming in Romanian, and then one of the things that he started to do, and that was really awful, I didn't want to be in any of the public spaces in the apartment alone with him. And he knew that. He knew I was intimidated by him. So if I was preparing a meal for myself and I was standing in front of the stove, he would purposely come out of his bedroom and sit at the kitchen table and stare at my back. It was terrifying. And then it got even weirder. One night I was sitting at the kitchen table having Chinese food takeout. In walks Dave and Rebecca and this third guy, who for the story's purposes I'm going to call Barry. It was explained to me by the three of them that Barry was a friend of Dave's back from Romania and that he was just there for a short visit. And I obviously didn't have a problem with it. It didn't seem weird to me at all, but this guy, Barry, was probably one of the biggest creeps I have ever met. Of the three of them, I think he was probably the most social in that he actually sat down and tried to engage me in conversation. And besides asking me like normal things like, what's your job? Are you a student? He started to ask me questions like, what's your favorite sexual position? And do you have a boyfriend? I came to find out that Barry was an illegal immigrant. He had come over as a cruise ship employee, and he actually had no intention of leaving our apartment. I don't know what Rebecca's thoughts were on this. She never really shared with me. It took a couple of weeks for that to really make sense because, you know, I thought, okay, 2 weeks, 10 days, something like that. That seems like a normal visit for a friend. But now we were moving into like 2 months. After weeks and weeks of having a second man in the apartment, a man that was creepy and made terrible sort of comments towards me, cornered me one night and asked me if I would consider marrying him for a green card. And he told me that he would pay me $10,000 to do this. And would I really, really please consider it? Being 18, I was naive in many different areas of my life, but this was one instance in which I was absolutely sure that I did not want to participate in a weird scheme. $10,000 was a lot of money to me at the time, but it certainly wasn't enough money for me to put myself through something like that. I couldn't even imagine what my parents would say to me if I followed through with a scheme like that. He cornered me on several occasions to ask if I had thought about it. He would up it to $20,000. He really needed the green card, this, that, and the next thing, and I just kind of ended up saying to him, well, no, I don't want to do that. I have a boyfriend. I don't think it will work. Finally, when I made mention of my boyfriend, of course, he backed down. Even though it seemed like Barry respected the fact that I had a boyfriend, he began to mimic Dave's behavior towards me. Now, Dave obviously didn't like me and had been making it very clear in his behavior towards me. But now I had a second man that was doing that to me, except that there were all these sort of sexual connotations that were underlying his remarks and his behavior towards me. So I had double the amount of scariness to deal with. However, as fate would have it, Dave found another apartment. I guess living with a friend in a small bedroom was probably doing his head in, and he'd found some other situation, came home one night randomly, and told me and Rebecca that he was leaving. And this was awesome, celebratory news. I couldn't wait for him to go. And Rebecca kind of said to me, well, if you want, you can take Dave's room and we can find a third roommate who will then take yours. And that was really exciting too, because my bedroom kind of felt like a jail cell. There wasn't very much light, and I didn't mind the increase in rent at this point. I just kind of wanted a bigger space, and I was thrilled at the idea of maybe getting a third roommate, another girl, somebody I'd have a say in. But this kind of left us with the dilemma of Barry. Barry didn't seem like he was bothered by Dave's news at all. He didn't seem like he was ready to go either. And when we confronted him about it, because Dave kind of moved out just like that. He like literally told us, and then 2 days later he was gone. And Barry was just like, well, I just need a few days to sort of figure out what I'm doing, but I will be out of here very soon. One afternoon I came home from work early, and Barry was in the kitchen with a girl that I'd never met before, and she introduced herself as Anna. Well, actually that's not her real name, but for the story's sake I'm gonna call her Anna. She was very tall, pretty, she seemed super respectful and kind. In fact, I liked her. I really didn't understand what she saw in Barry, but of course that's none of my business. Now, I wasn't immediately alarmed that there was a girl in his room visiting him. I was a little bit surprised because he hadn't ever brought anybody home, but of course, how could he have with Dave being in the room with him? When Rebecca came home, I made mention that there was a girl there, and she was a little bit confused, and of course that sort of set off the red flags for me too, because I was like, alright, something's going on. They all talked in Romanian, so most of the time I had no idea what was going on. Rebecca and I were sitting in the living room talking about this, and Barry must have heard and came out of the bedroom and kind of said to us, well, me and Anna are getting married. We are going to be your third roommates, and we are going to stay here, and we'll pay you rent, and we are gonna just live here. He didn't really give us a say in it. He was just like sort of declaring that this was his space, and he was bringing an extra person into the apartment. So this spoiled a lot of things for me. I wasn't getting the bedroom that I had been promised. I was now living with this man and a third woman. They were paying more money than Rebecca for their room. Less money than Rebecca, but more money than me, and that just didn't seem fair, like 2 people in one room. Somehow it had worked in the past that we had charged rent according to the size of the bedroom, but now having 2 people in the room, it just, I don't know, it didn't add up for me. It was at this point that I had it, and I made that clear to everybody. I don't know where I found the nerve, the courage to kind of speak up, but I guess it was just, I was at my wit's end in that moment as Barry was telling us that he was staying and Anna was staying. I was just like, this isn't right, this isn't fair. You know, either you guys are paying more rent or you're leaving now. I did not say that it was okay for you to be in my apartment with another person. I should have some say, I live here too. And I continued to do that through the whole time that they were there. Anytime I had the opportunity to speak up, I did. I feel bad thinking about it now because I took a lot of my frustration out on Anna, and she probably didn't deserve it. I did tell her about how he had propositioned me. I told her about how he had asked me to marry him. I told her about all the instances in which I felt bullied, and the only thing she could do was kind of apologize on his behalf, and that was it. That's all she could do. It certainly wasn't enough. But I do think that all of my clamoring probably led to them moving out sooner rather than later. They really were only in the apartment for, I would say, 2 months. When they finally moved out, I was over the moon. But it was at this point that things started to get weird between me and Rebecca. Rebecca was obsessed with money, obsessed with making it, spending it, saving it. She just loved money. Now, Rebecca worked in Bloomingdale's as a shop girl. She worked for Clarence, and I don't know if you know this, but in Bloomingdale's, there's a special entrance for employees to come in and out of, and they are checked. They are checked to make sure that they're not taking any of the products with them as they go, and I think employees do get a discount, and they also get to take 3 full-size products home once a month. So Rebecca came up with a plan that was really kind of ingenious, but it was super sneaky and ethically not very, it wasn't right. I came to pick her up from work one day, and she handed me a shopping bag that was really heavy, and she said, just pretend that you don't know me and leave, and I'll meet you at home. Now, this wasn't what I had expected. I thought we were gonna take the train together, but I didn't mind so much being on my own, so I took the bag, figuring that it was just a bunch of her stuff, and maybe it was a change of clothes. I didn't look, because it wasn't mine to look at, and I brought it home, and when she came in later, she took the bag from my bedroom, because I had brought it into my room, and she opened it up, and inside were probably hundreds and hundreds of samples of Clarins products. The samples are really nice. They come in these like tiny little plastic containers, and altogether she had, I would say, thousands of dollars worth of samples. And I could not believe that she had somehow tricked me into basically stealing. This, of course, was absolutely horrifying to me. But at the time, Dave was in the apartment. Barry hadn't yet moved in, and she was my only ally. So I didn't say very much, except that I didn't want to do that again. Please don't ever do that to me. I don't want anything to do with this. You're on your own. Over the course of living with her, I noticed that she also didn't understand social cues. I could sense that she was lonely, that she didn't have her family, and she wanted somebody to talk to. So she would often come into my bedroom unannounced, without knocking, and just sit down and begin a discussion. And a lot of times I really didn't want to do that with her. But again, having Dave in the house and him being so frightening, she was my only friend. I kind of humored her. But it got to a point where I think she felt so comfortable with me that she started to borrow clothing and jewelry and hair accessories, things that were my personal belongings. And she would do it without asking. So when I'd see her leaving for work or coming home from work wearing a skirt that belonged to me or wearing some earrings that my grandmother gave me, it was just kind of like, I don't know, it was violation again. What really did it though was our dog Una. My dog Una was meant for my younger brother, but when he moved in with my dad after my parents divorced, Una stayed with my mom. And my mom, of course, had been on the phone with me through most of this drama, kind of advising me and trying to give me courage. And she asked me if I would like to have Una sort of as a companion to kind of keep me company and to keep me sane in this crazy living situation. Now at this time, everybody was gone. Rebecca and I were the only two in the apartment. And when I told her that I wanted to bring the dog, she was absolutely thrilled. That was good news for me as a pet owner. Occasionally Rebecca would ask me, can I walk the dog? I'd love to take her to the park. Can I play with her? Is it okay if she comes into my room? And of course, there was no issue with that. Una was a little beagle. She was very friendly. It was fun having her there. She kind of broke up some of the monotony of my day, and she made the whole living situation feel lighter and smoother and just happier. One Friday evening, I came home from work to find that Una and Rebecca were both not in the apartment. I didn't think very much of it. Obviously, my roommate took her to the park or took her on a walk. But Friday evening turned into Saturday morning. Saturday morning turned into Saturday night. And Saturday night turned into Sunday morning, and I had still not heard from either of them. And I called, I texted, I didn't know where my dog was. Sunday afternoon, she walks in, and she had the dog with her, obviously. She had been over at a friend's house and had thought that it would be fun to take the dog with her. Of course, giving me no notice, not letting me know where my beloved pet was, and you can imagine how I felt about that. At this point, I didn't feel like Una was safe, so I had to get back in touch with my mom and let her know that I couldn't keep the dog in the apartment, and I gave her all the reasons why. My dog, Una, she ended up moving in with my mom's twin sister in New Jersey, and it was a really positive thing. I'm actually happy that it happened because my aunt is single and does not have kids, and Una became her furry child and lived out the rest of her life with Ellen in a lot of happiness. It turned out happy, I guess, but I had to make some excuses about why the dog couldn't be there. Thankfully, the landlady, who is Greek, who I told you guys about, I was able to kind of talk to her a little bit about the whole pet situation, and I was like, if Rebecca asks anything or says anything, could you just kind of like keep the peace and tell her that you told me that the dogs weren't allowed, or dogs aren't allowed in your apartment, because that would be so helpful. And she did. She played along really well, and I'm so grateful for that. Rebecca brought a third girl into the apartment. Her name is Dora, and she and I are actually still friends, so I'm using her real name. She was sharing the bedroom with Rebecca. She decided that she didn't want the small bedroom. It cost a lot of money, and she was working in a nightclub as a hostess, wasn't home very often, so she didn't mind paying like something like $200 to just live on the lower bunk bed in Rebecca's bedroom. And Rebecca seemed to think that that was great because, like I said, she was obsessed with money and was obsessed with saving it, spending it, so this worked out for her too. And together they lived in harmony for a couple of weeks until things started to go awry between the two of them. And I could sense that there were problems, but again, speaking in Romanian, I had no idea what was going on. It got even worse though because Rebecca brought in another two girls, and these girls were like literally straight off the boat. Only one of them could really speak English, and it was broken. So we had a very hard time communicating. It was a lot of like hand gestures and stumbling around, and I found that both of them were really, really sweet, and they were just, I don't know, maybe a year or two older than I. I took the small bedroom, so So Rebecca actually had to get a bunk bed and put it in there for them. And with the wardrobe and the bunk bed and no other furniture in that room, it really did look like a jail cell. She came into me and was kind of like, so I've got these two girls in the bedroom. They're really nice. They don't know very much about anything. They're so brand new. I think what we should do is we should charge them extra so that your rent goes down and my rent goes down, and then they won't know and it'll be fine and everything will work out and we'll save some money and it'll be great. So basically she wanted to cheat two girls that didn't understand American customs, didn't know New York City very well, probably didn't understand American money. She wanted to cheat them by charging them double for a room that was basically a jail cell. She also made up all these really weird rules about when they could use the kitchen and when they could be in the front living room. And even though I'd had tons of crazy roommates at this point, well, not tons, but like 3, we'd never had a rule like that before. If it was my turn to be in the living room to watch a movie or something, their bedroom door would be open and one would be on the top bunk, one would be on the bottom bunk, and they'd just be like lying there or reading a book or something because there was nowhere for them to go, and that made me feel terrible. It was like kind of looking into a jail cell too. And I was like, come on guys, just watch the movie with me, like this is so weird. As I got to know them, I really decided that I hated Rebecca's plan. This was probably the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I wanted out. I was done. I was not even gonna try to live in this apartment. And I was talking very openly to the landlady, Maria. She'd kind of become like an aunt, sort of, to me. And she had said like, well, you know, maybe I could get them out. I'll get Rebecca out and I'll just rent you the room. We can set a price between the two of us. That'll be fine, sufficient. But at that point, I didn't even want to be bothered with that. I mean, the apartment was lovely. I finally had the bedroom that I wanted, but I could not live with a person who would cheat others, especially people that were so super nice and sweet and didn't know any better. For this to work though, I needed help. So I approached Dora and we got to talking, and it seemed like we had some of the same thoughts. And the two of us decided that we were very compatible. Why don't we become roommates? Let's find another place. And that's exactly what we did. It was almost like Rebecca had a sixth sense, because as soon as I started talking to Dora, she knew something was going on. She didn't like that we were getting close, and so she started to get weirder and weirder about time allotments in the kitchen and who got to use the bathroom when, and it was starting to even feel worse and worse and worse. So I was glad that I was making the decision that I was, and I wanted my exit to be like super dramatic too. Dora went to work and she didn't have very many belongings, but I took the day off. So Rebecca went into Bloomingdale's and I started packing, and I packed up everything that belonged to the two of us in the kitchen. I packed up Dora's belongings, I packed up mine, and I thought that we would be out the door. Like, I thought that like Rebecca would come home and we would be gone and she'd be like, what's going on? But she actually came home early. So she came home in the middle of me packing. I have to say that I was so nervous that day, like so nervous, because I really thought I would make it without having to have that confrontation. But in the back of my mind, I knew that I would have to anyway. Like, you know, I just knew it was going to come to a point where I wouldn't be able to kind of get away from her without explaining myself in some way. And it happened. She walked in and she saw the boxes and she was kind of like, where are you going? What are you guys doing? And just kind of like that, with no anger in her voice or anything like that. And I like pounced on her. I was like, you're a bad person. You're trying to cheat these two girls out of money. Like, this is wrong. I don't want to live with you anymore. Ah! She didn't say anything. She was really mellow about it. She was kind of like, oh, okay. Well, good luck. And she went in her room and closed the door, and that was the last I saw of her. We got a U-Haul and my boyfriend brought us over to our new apartment, and that was kind of it. I don't really know if this story has been very funny, but it certainly has been therapeutic to talk about, because I think I've maybe kept it to myself for a while. The only other person that really understands, obviously, is Dora, and I ran into her not that long ago while I was in Astoria having Greek food with my family, and she actually told me that she's seen Rebecca on the street and that Rebecca is still terrifying and scary, and we had a good laugh about it. And yeah. The apartment that we eventually moved into together was great, and at that time my roommates were fantastic, but our landlord was a total slumlord and he was just incredibly psycho. So I went from having crazy roommates and a nice landlady to lovely roommates and a crazy landlord. If you're interested in hearing that story, just give me a thumbs up or leave a comment so I know, and maybe I'll tell that one for my next story time. I hope you guys liked my video, and I will see you next time. Bye!